Welcome to an evening with John Neeshaw and Julian Best. If anyone has any specific questions or requests, please let us know via the chat so John and Julian can cover those too. Welcome, John and Julian. Thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. On the schedule, I'm running first, talking about JMRI, and Julian is popping in with TCS. Because I'm going to screen share quite a lot, would it be smart to highlight just me to start with and then Julian later on?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So good evening, everybody. I'm John Neeshaw. If you're interested in JMRI, this is the bit. If you're interested in TCS, I am just Julian's warm-up man. And I'm possibly not very good as a warm-up man. But what I'm going to try and address tonight is layout control with JMRI. What is JMRI? JMRI is a Java-based model railway interface. It's a system of programs, computer stuff, which can connect your computer to your DCC layout via its DCC system and allow you to control various components of the layout. The nice thing about JMRI is it is free. It is open source software produced by a whole load of like-minded railway modelers who want to be able to use DCC and put their computers together. And it's a free download. It's open source. Ian, can I go to a share screen now? Is that all right? Can you turn sharing on for me, please?
It's on.
Thank you very much. And let's try that one. Hooray, that puts that's my screen at the moment. And if I pull up some stuff and find my... We'll get there in a minute. Too many things on the screen at once. JMRI. Okay. The best place to start with JMRI is the JMRI website, jmri.org. Go there, have a look at the homepage, start there. It runs on the language Java, and Java is a sort of programming language and a suite of programs which underlines a whole lot of stuff which runs regularly on your computer. Java runs things like Minecraft. It's at the bottom of financial applications and online banking from several organizations. And Java runs underneath all sorts of browser applications. Java runs on a computer, doesn't run on phones and mobiles. So you need the whole thing to be running on a computer, but you can put its output onto tablets and pads and things. What I'm going to try this evening is I'm going to try to show live how to set up some very basic JMRI panels to control the layout with. So if I can start, I'm going to show you what I've set up this evening. I have set up my DCC controller, which is this Lens box. It just happens to be Lens. It could be Digitrax, it could be NCE, it could be anybody's controller. In the Lens world, these two UV are the power in, and the power out to a layout comes on the red and black JK. And representing a whole layout, I've got one DCC Concepts point motor. In between the DCC control system, the Lens, and my computer is an interface. This is a Lens interface, and it's connected by that cable to the computer from which I'm talking to you at the moment. And with a bit of luck, we should probably kill that. If I can work out how to kill that one. Yep. Okay. So that's what we're running on tonight. And just to make it sort of obvious, I've got it sitting here on a little webcam. Here is that point motor representing the whole of a layout. Here is my DCC system, and here is the interface. The current Lens system has the interface built into the same box. So those of you who've got a modern Lens system have it built in. But JMRI is designed to run on any DCC system. There is no DC system which is incompatible with JMRI. JMRI is also compatible with any computer system. So you can run it with your Mac, you can run it with a Windows system, you can run it with Linux. And of course, if you can run it with Linux, then you can run it on a Raspberry Pi. And we do run it on Raspberry Pi for some of our layout applications. I'm not using any hand throttles for what we're doing. This is just going to be trying to do it all on the screen for you. So you can see, I can hope I can show you, it's relatively straightforward to use. Now, JMRI, as you can see from this screen, is a very, very comprehensive package of programs. You may have heard of Decoder Pro, and Decoder Pro is the part of the system which you use to program decoders in locomotives, to adjust locomotive decoders without fiddling with their CVs. We're not going down that route tonight. What I'm going to talk about is Panel Pro, about controlling aspects of your layout with JMRI. JMRI also does stuff like Dispatcher Pro and Operations, which is much more about how you use the railway. You can automate your railway with JMRI. I've done it a bit, but not a great deal. But JMRI is incredibly comprehensive system. It has a huge range of capabilities, and most of us only use a small amount of them. So I suggest that if you're interested in JMRI, once we finish doing this evening stuff, you go to this website and you go to releases and have a look at downloading JMRI. I would suggest you download the latest production version, which, as you can see here, is 5.8. There are test versions, but you ignore those. Just do the latest release version, 5.8. And here is its download bits. If you're downloading for Windows, you download this file, which is an exe. Downloading for Mac, you download a DMG. Downloading for a Linux or Raspberry Pi, you use these. Download it, install it, set it up on your computer. The website contains lots of information about how to do it. So if you're going to download and install it on Windows, the website tells you how to do it. Follow the website. It's relatively straightforward. It is based on Java, and so your computer needs to have Java built in. If you're using Macs and Linux, it's there. Sometimes with some older Windows applications, you have to mess about to get Java, but this website tells you how to do it. As I said, it will cope with all sorts of hardware and lists of hardware it will cope with. Here are the command stations, Atlas and CVP, and DCC and DigiKais, Digitrax, ESU, Fleischmann, Hornby. All of these are compatible with JMRI. So get hold of the programs on the website, download them, set them up. And once you've set them up, you will end up with some icons like these at the bottom. This one is Decoder Pro. It's got a picture of an engine on it. This one is Panel Pro. It's got a picture of a sort of signal cabin on it. In fact, they're not different programs. They're all the same program. It's just different interfaces to those programs. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on Panel Pro, and it will, I hope, open. I will just get rid of that behind it. And this is Panel Pro opening, and it's giving me, I've set up for my own use different profiles to do different things. I've set one up called GOG Demo for tonight. So if I click that, it's going to go OK. And of course, the first thing it does is get upset. And the reason it's got upset is because I haven't plugged my DCC system in. Who's a silly boy then? So we'll just kill that. And there you are. You can see the experts at work when they to tell you how it works, and it immediately doesn't work. So we'll plug it in now, and GOG demo we're going to use. And because I've turned my DCC system on, it will now work. And here we go. Now, this little window here is called Panel Pro. It's the important window because everything works from that window. And what we're going to try and do is live to build a Mimic panel, which we can use to control a layout. Those of you who are used to Macs will know on my system, the file menus for a Mac application appear right at the top here. If you're doing Panel Pro in Windows, then this file menu will appear along the top of the window there. It's just the way Macs are different from Windows. It's not terribly relevant. And what we're going to go is we're going to go to, before I do that actually, if we look at the Panel Profile menu, it gives us settings, and you will want to set this up for your particular DCC system. You can see I have this one set up for a Lens system because that's what I'm using, but we could just as easily pick Digitrax or Sprog or NCE, whatever your system is. This is not system specific. It will work happily with any of the systems. So let's kill that one. And let's have a look at this one. We're going to go panels. And if we click on panels, it gives us new panel and show panel. We're going to produce a new panel. And we've got a choice of having a control panel editor, which is about just the control panel element, what you might look at with switches and levers. But what I want to look at is going to look at a layout editor. So I'm going to click this one, which says layout editor, and that's going to open a window a bit like this, which gives me a window with a grid. I'm going to close it down a bit because I don't want to cover my whole screen. There we are. And this is the pad on which we're going to build the picture of our layout. And if you look along the top, it says we've got turnouts. JMRI uses the word turnout rather than point or switch. It's just we have to get used to that. It uses the word turnout. Here we have tracks. Here we have some other things called track nodes, which are joining bits, and sensors down here. We'll come to those. So, and the first thing about the track bits, we have turnouts. We have left-hand ones, right-hand ones, Ys, double crossovers. And to put a turnout onto here, I press the Shift key and then tap the left mouse button. I've got the radio button for RH press. So if I do it now, you can see it's produced a right-hand turnout sort of diagram. I could press left hand and I'll get that. If I chose to produce a single slip, here's a picture of a single slip. And those are things we might use. I'll kill these. This is right-click, delete. Yes. I'll keep that one. I like that one. Right-click, delete. Yes. So here we've got a turnout. I can move it around by pressing, in the Windows world, a right click and then dragging it about. In the Mac world, the command and drag it about. So I can put it there, say. And let's produce another one. Let's have a left-hand turnout. Shift key pressed and left mouse key. What should we do with that? Let's move it up there a bit. Now we can do things with these. We can manipulate them. If I go click on it with a right click, I can rotate it. I can rotate it any angle we like. A nice easy one is 180. Bonk. So we've turned it round like that. And let's drop a couple of right-hand turnouts on here. One there, one there. And they're all facing in funny directions. So I can rotate this one and go 180, and I can take this one and using my command key or by right click and drag, I can bring it down to there. Now there's a few points or turnouts for us, which are part of our layout. What we want to be able to do is connect them up and move them around. To move them around, as we said, you go right click and drag, or command and drag. But as well as moving the whole thing, we can grab these red spots and move those around like that. So I can point that one there, and I could point that one up like that. I could do the same over here. Let's move that. Let's move this one first, somewhere like that. And this one somewhere like there, and angle it like that, and angle it like that. You might get the idea of where we're going with this. And there's some points on the board. You know what your layouts look like. Now, what we need next is some little connectors. So we could click anchor point, and we press our shift key and the left mouse key, and we can drop anchor points. We can then move them around if we wish. One of the things about useful things, this display is an edit mode. And if we go onto this options window, it allows us to take edit mode off if we wish to, and it will look like that. If you keep edit mode on, we can do various other things. We can, because of this grid, we can use the grid if we wish, and we can move stuff around so it sits on the grid once we've moved it. So if I then pick up this point, I can drop it there and it will drop nicely onto the grid, and I can do the same with this one and drop it onto the grid and position those two so they sit nicely on the grid for me. What we probably need next is some track. So if we look up here to where we have track, if I click track, we want a track segment. I'm going to make it mainline because it makes it somewhat easier to see. The way to draw track is to hover over one of these red points, press the shift key and just drag it along, and you'll see it goes green. And when it goes green, if we let go, it's drawn a length of track. Shift, left mouse, drag, it's drawn a length of track. And we can keep drawing little lengths of track in a fairly... One of the things you may notice as we're doing this is that the the nodes that we were picking up from, as we do it, they go from red to green, which means they've been connected up. You see, I've got a couple of red ones down here. The ones which are connected up are green. And there's another one there. So what we've drawn now, well, what we've nearly drawn now, there we are, is a fairly simple little track diagram involving 4 points and a couple of sidings. A fairly sort of simple representative fiddle yard setup for many of us. Stuff that you've probably all got on layouts in some way or the other. And what I'm just doing is just moving around, just tidying it up, make it look a little bit neater. You can spend as long as you like neatening it and making it look pretty. Now that's a very basic track layout. If we take the edit mode off again, you can see what we've drawn. Not very pretty, but we can pretty that up afterwards. But that's not connected it to our layout yet. What we want to do is we want to make these things real points on our layouts. So let's turn our edit mode back on. Coming down here, we've got lots of things. One of the things which is useful is turnout options. What we can do with the points. And we're going to show turnout circles. That means once I turn the options off, little circles appear around those. We can make them different colors. We can do all sorts of things with them. Edit mode back on. So how do I define what these points are? Well, in JMRI, what we need to use is we need to make a table of our points. I'm just going to move stuff around on the screen a little bit to make it easier to see what's going on. We'll come back to our Panel Pro menu. This is a key thing. The menus differ depending on which screen you've got. If I've got this window, which is the layouts window, I get a selection of menu items, which is slightly different to this one. So on this one, I'm going to go Tools, and we're going to look at Tables. And the first thing in Tables is Turnouts, or points to its friends. And it opens a little box here in which we've got listed down these turnout sensors, lights. So this table is where I'm going to build my turnouts. So I'm going to add some turnouts. Because I am using a Lens system here this evening, Lens uses ExpressNet, so all of my system addresses will be X's. So if I press one, and I create a turnout, I got 1 and 2 there, then they're going to be named XT1 and XT2. X is for ExpressNet. If I was using Digitrax, it would be DTs. If I was using Sprog, they would be STs. Doesn't matter what the system is, it works exactly the same, but just gives you slightly different identifiers. We've got 4 points, so I better have another couple. The next one I want is number 3. There's number 3. I need another one, which is obviously going to be number 4. Notice that if I want to, I can put a username in, and if I called number 4 right lower, perhaps, and created that, you can see in the table right lower becomes number 4. So that gives me a little turntable, a little table of turnouts. Let's come back to here. Now let's define these. We're going to call that one 1, that one 2, that one 3, that one 4. So if I right click over these and go edit, an edit turnout box appears, and that one we said we're going to call XT1. We're not going to worry about any other settings. We're just going to press OK. And did I do that, or did I fail to do that? I think I may have failed to do that. XT1 done. There we are. And now you'll see that one leg disappears. So when I click on it, that turnout does a schematic or diagrammatic move. This one is going to be XT2. Which is, this one's going to be XT3. You may have noticed something happening. If you look at the panel at the bottom down here, my little webcam, where there is a DCC point motor, a DCC Concepts digital IP representing the whole of the layout, that point motor has been given the address 3. It's been told it's turnout number 3. So as soon as I click this one, you can see that throwing. Now that could be live on your layout now. That's as simple as it is. And this one we're going to edit, and this one is going to be number 4. But we've given it a username, so it'll give us the username by preference, which is right lower. Usernames are really quite useful because they describe what something is on your layout. If I now take the edit mode off, I've got a reasonable representation of what might be a line of 3 roads on your layout with points on them that you can control just by clicking them. That one changes that one. That will change that one. That will change that one. So I can now decide where I want my train to go by clicking on these. Now, some people never move further than this, and that's perfect for them because they've got a diagram of their layout, which is live, which is interactive. They can click on and it all moves. And just to remind you, you can hear and see that one changing. And that's all you need. You have built a very, very simple track diagram, which you can use live immediately. You don't need bits of plastic and bits of wooden box on the layout anymore. If you've got an electronic device, you can control it just like that. So there's a little bit of simple route, but we could just perhaps move a little bit further with this, because it may be that I only ever want to, if I run there, I would need to run out of there. So I could somehow make this route a bit more user friendly. And what we need to do is we need to add some virtual sensors and define some routes. So if I go back to this table that we produced earlier, and we click on sensors, and sensors can be either real physical sensors that the trains run over and cause something to happen, or they can be virtual sensors that you can directly click yourself and affect yourself. And that's what we're going to build. We're going to make some sensors that we can change. So we go add, and we'll go 111, and we're going to call this sensor top. We'll go create. What have I just? I've done an L route. I beg your pardon. I clicked on the wrong thing. I need a sensor. My X. Let's do another. Thank you. 111. Oh God, John can't type. We said we're going to call it top. And we'll create, and we'll have another one, and we'll call it 112, and we'll call it mid. And then we'll add a third one, and we're going to call it 113, and we're going to call it bottom. And create it. We've got 3 sensors we've just generated. We'll go back here and we'll go to our edit mode. And on the bottom line of here, which is where our sensors live, we can click that radio button and we can take the bottom one. And as we do with everything which goes on to this layout, we go shift, left key, there's bottom, mid, shift, left key, that's middle, and top, shift. And now with the right click and drag on a Windows or command and drag on Mac, I can pull this down here. That's my mid one. Drag that to there. In JMRI sensors, as they come out of the box, red means I don't know, black means I'm not activated, and yellow is active, just for information. So here are 3 sensors. So how can we use those to help us sort routes? Well, we need to define some routes. Let's make some routes, and we're going to add, and we're going to, well, we won't worry too much about the system name because we've ticked automatically generate. So we want a route which goes to the top. Now, these are the 4 points we've got, and these are the 3 sensors we've got. So we want to activate all 4 points, and we want to activate all 3 sensors. And we're going to the top, so I want the words thrown and closed in the context of these points is somewhat arbitrary. Sometimes you need to just put them in, see what happens, and if it doesn't go the way you want it to go back and switch them to the opposite. So if it's thrown but your point is going the wrong way, then go back and set it to closed. This is our top line we're trying to get, so we need to set top as active and the bottom 2 as inactive. We would like this route to be active if we stimulate the top sensor, and we can create. Now that's just one route we've generated. So if I deactivate all of them, and if I move, so the points are set in such a way that, let's get rid of that. That route is active. I want the top route to be active. So if I click on this, that will go yellow. And you notice these points change, those points change, and that one stays active. So we have set the route just by clicking on that one. And we didn't need to fiddle with the individual turnouts. We can do that twice more, and we can set a route called mid, and we can we want all of those active, and that needs to be thrown. That needs to be thrown. We want that one active, and we want the middle one to do it, and we create. And then for completeness, we'll do the bottom one. And this route is called bottom. And again, we want them all busy. We want those to be closed, that to be closed. And we want bottom to trigger it. I've done that quickly. I hope it works. Let's have a look now. If I click that one, so that one illuminates, and that route is there. If I click that one, so now we've gone from having to click individual turnouts to get a route to be able to click a single virtual sensor to set the whole route. And if you only ever wanted those routes without being able to set those independently, you can do something like going into those and picking them so they're disabled. And if I then go turn the edit mode off, the only place you can click now is on the sensors. You can't click those individually. And if you have a layout which is a bit complicated and you only want certain things to happen, then going for those sensors just allows you to set the route directly. I'm conscious of time, and so what I will just change one of these sensors to something else just for a moment. Go to edit mode. Within JMRI, there's a host of different icons you can use for stuff. So if I go in here and say edit sensor icon, this is this bottom icon. If I go change icon, it lets me go into the program directory, and here's a list of icons. And one of my favorite ones is big buttons. It's only because I made it. And we go drag them up. So that's a green for active, and a red for inactive, and a gray for I don't know. And we press update panel, and then what will happen is suddenly we get a nice big button on there. Sometimes this is really useful because for some layouts we use 11-inch touchscreens, and having a nice big button you can land your finger on is ideal. If I click on that one, that takes that route. But if I click on here, you see that goes big and green. We can also do clever stuff like taking this one, if only it would stop changing, and right click it and edit the sensor icon just to show you what other useful stuff is in here. Change icon. Here are our icons, and it's one labeled British Rail signals and large aspects. There's a nice range of color light signals you might like to use for your layouts, and there's even some big semaphores. I've got some little semaphores here. I think that one was the inactive. Just do the simple stuff, and it's active. And if I update a panel, it begins to look a bit more interesting, doesn't it? We can do stuff like that. So we can, that one's active, that one's active. So if we like the look of signals, we can do that with our layout to produce that sort of effect. And all of this can be done relatively quickly. And not everybody wants to have a laptop on their layout. And so is there a way of transmitting this to something easier to use, like a sort of handheld device? And JMRI supports a couple of applications which run on mobile devices. And the one which works with the system I'm using is Mac based. Is a thing called WeThrottle, which is these things never quite do what you want them to do when you oh, I know why it doesn't work, because you need in tools, you need to set up a server. Silly me. We need to start a thing called WeThrottle server, which will open a window like that. And now when I open, need to close it first. When I go into there we go. I get something like this, which is a hand throttle. I know it's slightly, I'm using my iPad because the iPad's easier to see. I can drive an engine with that, but it also has the ability to change points with that, give routes like that, or even on the same screen, I can produce that. And there you can see there is a picture of the thing which is on the screen as you're looking at above right. So if I click on the signal in the middle with my finger, you will see the one on the screen changes and the points change accordingly. So you can, as long as you've got wireless available and you've got wireless, your mobile device and your computer attached to the same wireless, you can drive the whole thing from either your phone or an iPad. It doesn't have to be Apple devices. It works for Android devices using a program called Engine Driver rather than WeThrottle. And it's relatively easy to do. Of course, this is just the beginning of stuff you can do. You can endlessly prettify panels. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to show you, for the only time I'm going to do it this evening, I'm going to do here's one we prepared earlier, because everything I've shown you tonight is new, produced this minute. But we can, if we go to load, we can load something. It doesn't like me loading lots of things at once, but so we'll have a demo for this one. This is the control panel for a club layout called Bowater, which is a paper mill railway. And if I click on that one, you can see it's very similar to what you've already seen. These are fiddle yards here, here, and here. These are the routes. And instead of having a sensor, a virtual sensor to trigger a whole route, on this one, we've produced sensors on each output of a point so that you click on either the red one or the green one and it will change. So you can pick a route just by going along the layout and saying, this is where I want my train to go. And it will give you that route. If I want to go down there, you can see the route for me. The reason we haven't done a single one in the center to allow a through route is that in this instance, we've got operators at either end. There's one operator here and there's another operator here. And one may be running a train there while the other one is running through there. So we've set this up to be independent. But this is the same principle. The other useful thing we've added here, which I use quite a lot, is a button which sets everything on your layout to a known state. I've called it a home button. If I click it, this returns to a base state. It's arbitrary what that base state is, but once I've clicked that, I know that the points will have changed and everything will be set up to that base state. And I'll show you one other, which is this one, which is some of you will have seen. Providing I did it. Did I do it? Maybe I didn't. No, I don't store. No, I've upset it somehow. I'll try it once more to give you the one I want, and if it doesn't, I will admit defeat.
As you've already got one open with mine.
Yeah, I know it doesn't like having many open, but I can do it by going to a different out of that profile into a different profile. I just wanted to show you quickly this one. Thank you. Which is the layout in the barn, which has a normal button there, which has taken the scene we started with and developed it further. Down here are roads, which are storage roads. We can set particular storage roads by clicking on those radio buttons. That gives me a road through there. I've used these little signals to give me routes. So I can click there, and that will open a route from here through to that bay platform. And I can cancel it. And because I've put some logic into it as well, if I happen to have set that signal to go, and I try to get into the bay, it will cancel that route and allow that route to go. I am conscious of time, so I will stop there. I hope I've demonstrated to you that you can do relatively quickly some quite simple stuff, but you can develop it as far as you want to. It is free, it is easy software, and I'm very happy to help anybody who wants to start fiddling with JMRI. The other useful thing for JMRI is there is an IO group for JMRI. That is one of those web groups which is available for discussion of everything related to that particular system. Thank you, guys.
John, that
Yes.
last part you showed on your layout in the barn, effectively, were you doing one route and then you selected another one? That is looking for conflicts in the route selection, isn't it? Because Dr. Dave has asked, when setting routes, can you check for conflicts? And that example shows that is in a nutshell, doesn't it?
That is exactly what that does. That was doing it very, very simply using routes, which to say, if there is a conflict, remove it. But the last route selected will win. So if I say I want that to happen, that will happen, and it will supersede anything which happened before. There is within JMRI various systems of logics and which allow much more complicated routing, so we can actually interlock stuff. So some stuff will have precedence over others. It gets really very complicated, and it becomes almost a hobby in itself, sorting that sort of stuff out. So I've tried to keep it simple with relatively simple routing, but there is nothing that you can't do with JMRI. It will run trains for you. It will run them automatically for you using things called scripts. It will do anything you want it to do. And I've just scratched a little bit of the surface.
Brilliant. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Ian.
So we can now segue very neat. Oh, sorry, Jackie, carry on.
Sorry, there was just one point to mention from Graham Clark earlier about the fact that I know John referred to the fact it'll work with DCC. Graham was just saying that they actually use it at their club with a DC layout using a Merg C-bus.
Yes, they're using C-bus. Yeah, that works. I mean, the CBus is surrogate DCC. The trains are running analog, but everything else is effectively being digital, the control system. So yeah, that works with CBus. You don't need to have a fully DCC layout. Thank you.
Okay, and now we very gently segue into Mr. Julian Best.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Over to you, Julian.
Thank you, John. So I wanted to just follow up from John's talk on JMRI to show you what I've done using train controller software. The same principles apply. There's lots of different software out there, ranging from open source like JMRI to quite expensive these days like Train Controller. I'm not sure I would necessarily purchase it today because of the cost, but I bought it 12, 15 years ago and I've just upgraded along the way. It's 30 years old or thereabouts, so it's very mature. And 12 or 15 years ago, when I was first looking at these systems, JMRI wasn't as well developed as it is now. And Train Controller didn't have competitors like iTrain and Rockrail and WinDigipet, and there are loads out there these days. But anyway, I thought it was probably worthwhile just showing you how I've implemented it using Train Controller and using some bits of automation as well, just to show you what's possible. So, and hopefully, like John, I'll do this in real time as well, IT issues permitting. So first off, this is my implementation of Train Controller. It's incredibly flexible. So what you see can be varied greatly. This is what they call the switchboard, and it's where you create your layout. So what you see here, if you just look at the top half of the screen, is a representation of my layout. It's a simple branch line terminus, 2 platforms, and on the right hand side you have some storage sidings. The thing about the other thing I should mention about Train Controller is that it comes in 3 different versions. It comes in bronze, silver, or gold, with increasing numbers of features as for the different versions. It will also talk to a range of command stations in the same way that JMRI does. I don't know whether JMRI has this feature, but Train Controller will also talk to multiple command stations at the same time. You can set up more than one command station. So this can be useful where you've got a mixed economy, where you might, for example, have a different feedback system to your DCC control system. And feedback systems are very important for automation because it needs to know where your trains are, and it needs to know what sort of train it is, and it needs to know ideally that your point has moved and has moved successfully before it moves the train across it, because that way could cause problems otherwise. So you can set up multiple systems. Like John, this is set up for Lens. Just so happens that that's the system I've always used, and it works pretty reliably with it. So what you see at the top here is, as I was saying, is the basic representation of the layout, and it's quite flexible. You can go into edit mode just the same way as you can with JMRI, and you see here all the different blocks that I've set up. A block is basically a section of track which can be used with an associated train detector. Now that detector can be occupancy, so it knows when a train is in a section of track because current is being drawn, or it could be a contact indicator of some sort, which could be optical. It could be that it senses by virtue of an infrared detector or similar when a train is in that block. And there are other systems as well available. So what we can do is change the look and the style of this switchboard. And to do that, we can go into View, Switchboard, and we can customize it. And what you can do here is you can change things like the background color, the size of the track, the size of the grid. You can change the highlighting, so you can change the colors of tracks that are occupied, the colors of turnouts when they're changed or not, and the same with blocks as well. So you can choose the color of blocks when they're free or when they're occupied. So you've got a hell of a lot of flexibility as to what it actually looks like. And what I've attempted to do here is to come up with something that vaguely resembles an NX panel from UK Railways, typically in the 70s, which is my chosen era of running trains. So again, you can click on a point, which will change that point. And you can see there's a little, well, hopefully you can see there's a little green dot here, and that little green dot moved as the point changed. And that's confirmation that that track, that point has actually moved. Now, that doesn't have to be a green dot. That can be whatever you want, because again, it's very flexible. So again, if we go into edit mode, if we double click on this point, you can see here, you've got a basic name for it. You can set speed limits through the point. The connection is the address within your command system. And you can choose whether the point operates normally or you've got the connections reversed. And you've got various indicators and conditions that need to be met before that point can change, if you so wish. Now, we're not actually going to use those on this. And you've also got what's called a position control. And position control is where you set your feedback. So this is what gives you confidence that the point has moved. Because it's a lens system, I'm using the built-in RS bus, and you can see here, this is the address for that feedback for that point motor, address 5 input 2. And this is what is quite important, because, as I say, train controller needs to know that the point has moved in order for the route to be set up. And you'll find that the dialog box is very similar for all the different items, different objects that you can create using train controller. You can set up switches, you can set up indicators, you can set up various objects. Those objects could be a train, they could be a double-headed train, it could be a particular type of train as well. I'll come on to trains a bit later. Let's look at blocks. If we look at a block, again, we double click this. You've got a name for that particular block. One of the things that train controller does is, as well as having your own signals on a layout, there are internal signals within train controller, and train controller knows if a block is occupied or if you can't drive a train to it because the point is not set correctly or because it's locked for whatever reason. And this is what the signal and speed limits are. They indicate the maximum speed through it, restricted speed through it, or whether there are conditions which are enforced before you can actually drive the train through it. This is the block editor, and with the block editor, again with automation in mind, you're setting things up like the brake distance, the stopping distance. So I've got two feedback sensors for this particular block. I've got one which is an occupancy sensor, which works on the block itself. And then I've got a contact sensor at the end here, which is this little red dot at the end here. And when this is triggered, that will stop the train dead. It stops the train hammering into the buffer stops should something go wrong. And what you've got here then is you've got the brake marker. So it knows the length of this block. And what it's saying here is that I want to start braking at 35, I think it's inches in this case. So the brake marker is 35 inches. And within 35 inches, that train will come to a stop before the end of the before the end of the block when that is triggered. And this is the contact sensor here, which has a stopping time of 0. So in other words, when this is triggered, you stop dead. And again, you can double click on the block, and again, it uses where you set up with a similar dialog your DCC address for that block. As I say, most of the dialogues are the same. No scripting involved in TCS at all. You can also control things like trains as well. So you can specify what train can enter that block. So for example, I've got it set up so that blocks in the freight area, in the goods sidings, passenger trains can't go into them. Now, that causes a bit of a problem sometimes, but you get the idea anyway. So that's blocks. Similarly, things like signals. I double click on a signal. Again, you've got the connection for that particular signal. You can change the configuration of it, the type of signal it might be. You can choose what that signal looks like here. There's a lot to choose from, or you can create your own image. You say, okay, well, I don't particularly like that particular style, so I want to edit that image, and you've got a full editor here. So you can choose or design your own signal to be exactly what you want it to be. So you come out of this. You can also take it a step further with things like triggers. So what causes that signal to change? What causes it to not change? Generally, you've got things, your tabs along the top of the dialogues are trigger, condition, and operations. I'll come on to that again in a minute. So that's your basic blocks, signals, and points or turnouts, whichever you prefer. The other thing that Train Controller really needs are routes, and it needs to know about trains before you can start to automate things. So the simplest way to create a route is to drag and drop, and you can set up a new route using a wealth of different. I should have shown you these options previously, really, I suppose. This is just the toolbar where you're creating different track segments, or you're creating turnouts or buffer stops, or whatever it might be, push buttons, turntables, routes, whatever. With a route, you can set a start point and an end point, and you can select switches or contacts which trigger that route. So what I've done here, for example, this is representing an NX panel. So I've got buttons which indicate the start and the exit of that route. So if I wanted to set up a route from platform 1 up to the advanced starter, I'll click on that switch, which is the exit, and here's the end of the route. And what it does is it sets up a route, it sets the point, and if that route has set correctly, and it knows it's set correctly because the points have moved, and it knows the points have moved, then it clears the signal, and you can see the platform 1 starter has gone to green. There's a route button here as well, which is indicated on as well. This I should say, this section of screen here is basically a load of switches which enable me to have a bit more play factor by creating different interlocking rules and creating different parameters for running the railway. I won't go into much of these at all, but you can also set a route this way as well. So if I clear the route like so, the signal has also cleared. And there's many different ways of setting up routes, should I want to. So there's another route I can set, and this time, once the points have moved, then the ground disk signal here has changed as well. Okay, so that's routes. Now I need some trains to go over them. Well, the trains are at the bottom of the screen here that I've pre-configured, or I should say the engines in TCS speak. And what I can do, again, if I go back into edit mode, I can choose one of these locomotives. And here is where you set up your engine. So in this case, it's address 1227. I can give it a name. In this case, I've given it a combination of the type, so it's a class 122, and the number at the end. You can give it your own icon if you want, or again, you can create your own, and TCS Train Controller also provides different software for creating your own animations of trains, or for creating your own images, and they even sell a catalogue, should you wish, of thousands of different photographs of locomotives. So that's your connection to your train. You've also got a built-in programmer as well, so you can set up a programming track here, and you can program directly from within Train Controller. Here's your speed. Now, this is one of the cleverer aspects of Train Controller. It needs to know how your locomotive performs. It needs to know how quickly it's going to traverse a block section. And there's different ways of doing it. You can give it a rough indication yourself, or this is one of the clever parts, is you can set it up to create a profile for that locomotive. And the way I do it, I'm not going to demonstrate it now because it takes a little while, but the way you do it is you set up 3 consecutive blocks. So in this particular case, I've set up this block, the mainline block, and what I've called the bridge block. And what happens is that you give it parameters whereby your locomotive is just moving for each direction, and that's your starting point. And then you set it off, and Train Controller automatically drives that train backwards and forwards through that block, and it builds up a speed profile for that locomotive. And you can see these graphs here. What it's done for each of these dots is driving the train through that block at a certain speed, increasing in speed up to the maximum model speed of that locomotive, and it builds up a profile. And so it knows that if it sets it a scale 40 miles an hour, it's going to take X number of seconds to traverse that block, and it knows how long that block is. So it can then extrapolate that to all the blocks on the railway, and it knows for any given speed, or even for an accelerating or for a decelerating locomotive, it knows how long it's going to take to traverse. And from that, it can work out very precisely where to stop a locomotive, where it needs to stop a locomotive. And it is quite impressive, actually, how accurate it can be, as long as you've done this speed profiling. Even if you haven't done the speed profiling, it's still pretty good, because again, it knows about blocks, it knows about lengths of blocks, and you've got your occupancy and your contacts as well. So it's quite good at doing that. So that's your speed control. You can also set things like your momentum, your acceleration and deceleration here as well if you want. You can also set up functions. So here you can program or you can tell it what the different functions for your locomotive DCC decoder are. So you can choose the different function command and what it does, and you can give it an icon as well. So it's much easier than using your handheld controller and pressing buttons. I'm trying to remember what each button does for which function. There's another neat feature, which is resources, and you can give each engine criteria for how much fuel it has. Diesel for a diesel locomotive, for a steam locomotive it's water and coal, and then Train Controller will work out from how much running that locomotive has done if it's low on resources. And if it's low on resources, you get a warning. It gives you time to go off and refuel, or if you run out completely, it will stop and you can't move it. Obviously, that's something which you can choose to include or not. Just depends how much play factor you want, really, with your layout, I guess. And again, you like a typical dialogue within TCS, you've got an operations tab as well. So again, you can give lots of different operations that happens when that train moves in different states. It really is pretty flexible, and how you use it is very much up to you. So what I've done, I've got a load of trains at the bottom here, and you can see that some of these blocks which are occupied have got numbers on them. And so that's a train or locomotive occupying that particular siding. Actually, it'll probably help if I show you the station screen here. So you can see here there's two DMUs in the station platform, and there's a class 27 in the goods yard. And that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing the 27 here, and you're seeing the two DMUs in the two bay platforms. So very simple way of using Train Controller is to drag and drop. I can turn on the drag and drop feature, and what I'll do is I'll just run this DMU up to the advanced starter signal. And it really is as simple as just hovering over the train, click on it, drag it up to the end, where I want it to stop. It will set the route. Once the route is set, it will clear the signal and it will start the train. And you can see there it goes. And it stopped it just before the starter signal. And if I go back to Train Controller, you can see the DMU is now in this block and the route is cancelled behind it. So again, I can just do the same thing and take it back again. Drag the DMU back up to the platform. It sets the route. Clear the signal. And there it is, back in the station, just stopped before the before the buffer stops. So that's a very basic way of operating it using a Train Controller. Now you don't have to do it that way. There's lots of different ways to do it. You can control the train using these throttles down the side on my screen on the right hand side here, but you can move them around. You can change them. You can change the size as you wish. You've got an odometer there to show you how far the train has gone. You've got all the functions down the bottom here, like so. I just move them over here just to keep them out of the way, basically. And however many you have is up to you. You can choose what particular locomotive you see on that controller. The symbols down the side here, this brown here, that represents diesel. So you can see they've got a full tank at the moment, but as that gets used up, then this will gradually decrease. And you can see here that on the 27, I've got the rear lights on at the moment. I've got the cab light on. I can turn on the headlights. Again, you've got the horn. And so on. Again, it makes it easier than fiddling about for it on your control. But that's not to say that you can't use your controller at the same time. I've got a lens controller here, and I could just as easily use this to control it. The only caveat with Train Controller is if you do want to use your handheld controller, then for that particular locomotive, you really need to change it to be a manual control so that Train Controller knows it's not driving that train. It just tends to track the train better if you tell it that I'm doing it manually. So that's two different ways of, or three different ways, if you like, of driving it. There's another way. Train Controller does have its own built-in method of remote operation, and that is a system which is called Smart Hand. and SmartHand uses just a straightforward web browser. So again, if I show you on my phone, I don't know whether you can see that. You probably can't, can you? If I hold it at an angle, there we go. That's better. So you can see there you've got a throttle, and it's the same sort of throttle as you have on the TCS screen itself. And I can change that. I can change it to be a representation of the track panel as well. And the thing about this is that it doesn't use an app. This just uses your web browser. So you don't need to install anything, and it'll operate on any browser as well. So that's SmartHand. Let's cancel that route. Now, the other thing that you can do with Train Controller is set up schedules. Now, with schedules, you can say, I want this train to drive over this route at this particular time if you wanted to, or on a button press, or however you want to do it, really. This is one of the things I'm going to keep coming back to with TCS, is just the flexibility of it. And consequently, it can get very complex if you want it to. It depends how you want to use it. But I'll show you the schedule system. Now, in TCS speak, it's a dispatcher window. I have a number of schedules down the side here. So if I click on, say, station to yard 4, what it shows you here are the 2 platforms and yard 4, which is this particular block or storage siding. And the way I have it set up, if we click into edit mode, here's where we set up what can be, again, quite a lot of complex rules if you want it to be. So the idea here is any train that will be, or any loco that will be in either of those platforms, will run through to yard 4 and back again, because I set it on a shuttle mode. Number of times it does it, well, 0 means it just keeps doing it over and over. The rules are where you've got a lot of flexibility in how that schedule is operated and the various criteria. I don't propose to go into any of these, but just to demonstrate that there are a lot of options available. Successors, this is where you can link different schedules. So I can say, after this schedule, I want that X schedule to start in afterwards. Trains, you can say, right, I only want that schedule to operate particular trains, and only if there's particular condition for that train to operate as well. So you can see how you can build up quite a lot of control over what you want that to do. So I've got two schedules here, station to yard 4 and station to yard 3. So let's just set them off and we'll see what happens. So we'll start them here and we'll start it here as well. And we'll just go back to this view so you can see what's happened. And what's happened is that Train Controller has grabbed a train and a route and set that up. And what I've done is I've set up a waiting time. So this won't happen. This train won't happen immediately. It's part of the flexibility of it. You can say, right, I want this train to wait in the station for 30 seconds or whatever it might be before it moves off, and then I want it to carry out this particular schedule. You can also do it so that it says, okay, before it starts that schedule, I want it to turn on the engine on the train, sound the horn, buzz the guard, whatever it might be. Again, it's up to you how complex you want it to make and how complex you want it to be. So set up the route, and we're just waiting for that time to elapse, and then it will hopefully make a move. And normally we can tell it's going to do it because it will. The starter signal will clear. And the way I tend to use TCS quite a lot is to set up these schedules running in the background whilst I'm doing some shunting in the foreground. So I'm doing a load of freight shunting, and it will allow me to have something moving in the background whilst a train, so it gives the impression that something's happening on the layout whilst I'm doing something else. And then when I've finished freight shunting, I can grab a route and the train, the schedule will automatically start afterwards. So it's heading off to the storage yard. If I go back to TCS, you can see the route clearing behind it, and you can see how it's progressing along the route. And then once it comes to the end, you can see the throttle going down to 0. Now TCS has immediately grabbed another route for the bay platform. This time, this is the second schedule starting. It sees that route has been completed and it's now free. The bay platform starter is cleared. So we're just waiting now for the driver to get his act together. And we can see in Train Controller how it's moving down the blocks. And the signal will clear behind it. And you can see there how the DMU sped up as it left that block. Again, it's a rule that says there's a speed limit on blocks within the station area, but as it leaves the station, that speed limit is cleared. And you can see now that it's arriving within that siding, and there will be a wait time, and then probably the DMU Class 101 will make a move back again. So that just shows you very, very quickly and very basically some options for running schedules within Train Controller as well. And again, you can make it as complicated as you want. You can have a timetable within TCS. You can say, right, I want to have for a certain time. I'll show you that timetable here. You can build up different schedules to run at particular times. And of course, TCS has its own clock as well. And for that clock, you can choose the speed, whether it's real time or whether it's running twice the speed or whatever you want. Again, you can choose it. So again, just another method of running trains within TCS. And you can see now that, so you can hear that, but this has been programmed for a bell exchange. So that's not me doing it, that is Train Controller doing initiating a bell exchange. You can see the train coming as the blocks clear. Seemed to got a little short there, I think. For some reason, not quite sure why. The point hasn't quite moved. That's what it was. Tell you what it is. It's one of these cobalt point motors, and they have like a little lever, a little brace underneath them, and that brace is just held on with friction on the plastic, and sometimes it drops down. So you can see here that that what's happened is that brace has moved down, so the point motor has still moved. But unfortunately, what's happened, TCS thinks the point has moved, even though it actually hasn't. So that is one situation where the feedback hasn't actually worked. But hopefully you get an idea anyway of the sort of capabilities of Train Controller. How are we doing, Ian? Any questions?
I think the only one that, I mean, Phil Taylor's just asked, can it operate the semaphores? And I've said, yes, it controls the signal semaphores as well as we could see, as we evidenced. I think there was another one earlier on. Dr. Dave asked, can train control, excuse me, I'll just have another whiskey later. Can train controller allow automatic uncoupling?
Yes, yes, it can. It depends what uncoupling system you have. People have created this. If you use KDs, for example, people have created this what they call the KD shuffle, whereby the train will move backwards and forwards to uncouple. And because TCS is very good at accurately knowing where the train is, I think people have achieved this quite well. Alternatively, if you're using locomotives which have got built-in uncouplers in them via a function of the decoder, then yes, absolutely, TCS can operate those functions just as easily as it can a turnout or semaphore or whatever. And I think probably the schedule demonstrated that, whereby you heard the horn before the train move off. Again, that was TCS operating a DCC decoder function on that particular locomotive. So there's no reason why that couldn't be an uncoupler or anything else.
Another question from Phil Taylor from earlier. How does TCS deal with length and weight of trains?
Now, yes, you can specify, again, you can specify the what you have. I didn't go into that. There's different ways of doing it. For an individual train, when you set up the locomotive, you tell TCS the length of that locomotive. So it knows the length of that locomotive. So for the DMU, for example, it knows the overall length of both those carriages. If you want it to know a train length, then you're probably better, or it's more reliable to have a method of detecting the end of the train, which could be just a resistor across the wheels, so you know that will trigger an occupancy, a current-based occupancy detector for that particular block, so it knows when the train has cleared a block that way. I believe you can also use vehicle groups, they call it in TCS, where you can build up different trains, and you can say, right, this consists of all these different wagons and cars, and you have to tell it the length. But you'll find this with TCS. There's different ways of doing most things. It's just finding it in TCS. I think the operations manual is something like 500 plus pages, and I found a lot of it doesn't actually tell you what to do. It just tells you that it can do it. I've yet to find anything that TCS can't really do. Although one of the things that perhaps is a bit of a limitation is that there's no easy way of getting information in or out of it in real time. There's no API, application programming interface. The only way really is through DCC or a feedback bus. But having said that, you can do a lot that way as well.
Just going back to that point about train lengths, and you saying a resistor across an axle, across a wheel set, if you had a brake van that had its own built-in LED, would that automatically detect anyway, because you'd have the built-in resistor with the LED?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, brilliant. I did have a question that came in from an email earlier, Julian. It was from Brian Neal, who couldn't join us this evening. And he was asking about the ANE model LD101 system. Could you tell us a bit about that? I think he was asking about dual controllers.
I had a look, and yeah, it's a command station from what I can make out. The thing about it is that it will operate DC and DCC, so it's two different systems in one command station, is what it looked like to me. So that was a command station as opposed to software for controlling trains.
So if he was to go down that route of purchasing an A&E, he would still need the rest of the equipment for it to interface with, wouldn't he?
He would.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Are there any more questions from anyone to John or Julian? Deathly silence. I think they're probably just stunned at how comprehensive JMRI and Train Controller really are. And you've both done very well in getting the basics across to everyone this evening. So thank you both very much.
And very nice comments coming in as well, just saying thank you and how useful the demonstrations were from both of you.
Well, if anyone's got any other questions about TCS or this evening in general, please put them on the forum or contact me that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take direct messages from the forum, conversations on the forum, because I'm very happy to help people get started with JMRI if they want to, because it costs you nothing to download it and have a fiddle, kick the tires and see if it might be useful to you.
Yeah, I mean, these guys really are, a great resource that we can tap into because they're very magnanimous with their time. And in fact, I was over at John and Jackie's on Monday, and John was looking with Decoder Pro at 3 of my Class 40s, and we'd just do some reconfiguration, and it worked really well. It was really impressive to see what you can do using JMRI as the first step on your route for going down this DCC train control systems or whatever you want to go into. But yeah, it's a very good platform, a very, very good platform. So thank you both very much. I'm going to now screen share. I'm just going to do a quick final presentation for this evening. So for next month of the Evening With, we have Dan Everson doing a session on painting, weathering buildings and figures. Dan has got his own business called Tunnel Lane Models, and he has a YouTube channel, also Tunnel Lane Models. Anybody interested in coming to this session, when you sign up and get the joining letter, there is a link to one of the videos Dan has put on YouTube, which will give a little oversight into what he's doing. But this is going to be another really interesting session because Dan is very, very busy. So we're quite grateful that he's got the time one evening to set aside and do this for us. Free to members as usual, and if you're a non-member, a princely sum of £3, less than a coffee from Costa. Let's go into.
Could I just ask a quick question through John Leeshaw, please?
Of course you can, Keith.
Right, John, I presume your barn layout is still fully Lens operated, and if so, do you use any of the boosters that you can sometimes need to boost the power up? And if so, how does it conflict with JMR when you've broken your fiddle yard up, as you showed us in the diagram?
Right. The DCC system we're running through is all Lens, as you said, although various components are non-Lens. The layout in the barn runs on Tortoise motors, and those instead of using Lens decoders for those, I use the DAC10 from what used to be CT Electronics, but it doesn't matter. Boosters, because it's a biggish setup and I use occasionally quite a lot of big diesels on it, old diesels, I do have an extra 5-amp booster on that system, and I think you've got one too in your garden.
Absolutely.
And it has no impact on the way JMRI works, having breaking the layout up. It makes no difference at all. It doesn't. The JMRI control is not impacted by anything you do with the Lens system, Keith.
And just lastly, have you, John, since I've known you, have you now broken your barn up into divisions rather than one or two?
Are there separate power districts in the barn? No, it's still on a single power district. But what I do run separately now is I run the accessories, that is the points and things, on a separate bus. So I run a track bus which powers the trains everywhere, and I run an accessory bus which powers the points and a few other gubbins everywhere. But that's probably a conversation for a different evening with on
I just
DCC
thought I'd
control.
throw it in, that's all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
A
Kate.
quick one before we revert back to Ian. Don Wilsmer was just asking if it's worth using JMR Decoder Pro.
Yes, JMRI Decoder Pro is an entirely different evening with. I think it's a wonderful system. I use it a lot. Julian is nodding because Julian
I
uses
agree.
it too. Perhaps
I wasn't querying it. I was just saying it's worth having JMRI basically just for the Decoder Pro,
Yeah.
even if you don't do anything else with it.
Yes.
I agree absolutely. JMRI for Decoder Pro is invaluable. And I've been running JMRI for probably 15 years. And every few months I discover a bit more and things I can do with it. And I can drive trains from one place to another automatically. It's limitless. But we just scratched the surface. But I agree with you. Decoder Pro is fantastic.
Yeah, it is. I use it just as you described, John. I have it using it with a Sprog, and for programming your decoders, absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, because the rest of it, I prefer to do handheld controls and things like that, not the screen. But trying to do a decoder, it's much easier with Decoder Pro.
Yeah.
You don't have to learn CV numbers.
No. And the other thing is that I'm doing a talk in November, and I may cover the thing that the gentleman was talking about, and a bit about what you were saying, where I'm talking about using DCC accessory decoders. So I will probably mention about why you might want a separate bus and things like that.
That would be really useful, Don. And off the back of what you three have just said about Decoder Pro, I have approached a member of the Guild technical team to see if he can do an evening with next year specifically on Decoder Pro. But if he can't, I can see there are 3 possible willing volunteers on the sidelines that may be able to step in at the last minute. But yeah, look out for that. There seems to be more interest in members at the moment regarding DCC, JMRI, Decoder Pro, and even though we've already done a session on installing chips into locomotives, which John Gay did March this year, I think it was. I think we might revisit it next year. So, you know, there is such a large interest, especially off the back as well of Philip Downs' session last month on radio control and Peter Reynolds' session in May about, you know, DCC control for servos and stuff as well. So I think next year we're going to have quite a few more of these sessions specifically looking at these topics for members and for other people who'd like to be involved. So thank you, Don. Once again, thank you for stepping forward for November.
One other thing to mention it is that somebody in Merg said that they were approached by the Guild who wanted to do some how-to leaflets or, you know.
We approached, what was it, Ian Metcalf?
No,
I think
Ian, it's
Ian McDonald.
Brian has just contacted both Colin and
Oh.
Ian McDonald from Merg, and Don has come forward and spoken to Brian about potentially helping us with some of the how-to booklets.
Oh, right. No, I was thinking we approached Ian McDonald about doing some basic layout wiring, didn't we? But he was unavailable. That was it. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I think there's another. Sorry, I think there's another question for John, isn't there, Jackie?
I can see it. There's a message from me. It says, with JMRI, how to do end-to-end routing, point to point. And you can do that. The way to do it with JMRI is using NX routing, entry exit, as Julian was talking about. JMRI will do it too. And it uses a system called warrants, and it is doable. It's rather more complicated than to discuss in a quick answer here. But yes, it is perfectly doable with JMRI. Go to the JMRI website, look up NX warrants on the JMRI website.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Don,
you.
were you going to add something else there, Don? Sorry.
Yeah, what I can say is Colin Head, who was one of the people approached, put something on the Merg forum.
Yeah.
I've said that between myself, Peter Reynolds, and John and Julian, we could probably answer any of the questions that they need.
Yeah.
And as we've got two former editors there, right? I think we
You and who else?
You're not trying to deny your past, are you?
No.
No, but between us, we could make some sense of these leaflets rather than involving other people who may not be as familiar with all the stuff, because it's I know that you've had a lot of experience with this, John, and I've got a lot of experience with it too. So
Yeah.
We could.
Very kind, Don. And I was in a meeting this morning with Brian, and he mentioned that you'd contacted him. So he's going to follow that up, and then you can make the suggestions about the people within the guild who can probably help with that. Perfect.
Yeah. Very good. I just wanted to mention it because otherwise it could go all over the place, different people doing different things.
Yeah, no, it is joined up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I'll carry on with the end of the show, as it were.
Yeah, thank you for this.
That's okay. So as I was saying, Dan Everson next month. As Fred Ponting used to say, book early. That should be a good session for any of you interested in painting, weathering buildings and figures and making them look distressed or old or careworn. Our calendar for the rest of the year. So Thursday, 26th of September, we've just completed that. So that will get a completed sticker. And as you can see, next month, Dan Everson. And then finally in November, our very good friend now, Don Wilsmer, has come forward. I don't know what's happened to that at all. It's gone silly. DCC remote setting and adjusting of servos. I don't know what's happened to that graphic. I do apologise, because I had to edit it this morning. For any non-members who may be with us this evening or may watch the video on YouTube, you can join the guild any time during the year. Now, there is no specific start and end point to a calendar year, as it were. And you get your first month. You can sign up for a month for free to gauge what you might like about the guild. So you'll have access to the forum, and you see what you like if you want to become a member and join us. If you go to the website, this is our homepage. As the red arrow shows, you click on About Us, which opens another menu box. And as the red arrow shows again, click on Join Online, which then takes you to the next page, and you get a membership application form. There's more below to fill in your name and other details, but it just basically gives you an idea of what is on the page. You do a submit, and then of course that will all go through, and you'll get a membership card back to you in the post with some goodies. We also have accessible from our homepage on the top right here with the red arrow in the box, our Instagram channel, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. And specifically regarding YouTube, because that's where this video recording will be hosted, it takes you to our homepage again on YouTube. You can see there, Gauge Our Guild. If you were to click on videos, it would then open up the page for all the rest of the videos that you could see, and then peruse and enjoy at your leisure. Finally, our new show for this year, Saturday, 7th of December at Wigan, Robin Park Leisure Centre. Well, as I say, it's a new show for us in the Northwest. So we're now into 4 shows a year. So just in time for Christmas for anybody who would like to come over to Wigan and buy themselves some pre-Christmas presents. And then also we've just had published recently our dates for events into 2025. So Saturday, 1st of March for the spring show at Kettering. Saturday, 31st of May for the summer show at Kempton Park. Saturday the 6th and Sunday the 7th September, Guildex at the Bingley Hall. And then once again, the winter show, Saturday 6th of December at the Robin Park Leisure Centre in Wigan. So once again, I would like to thank Julian and John for this evening. A very educational session. I've learned a lot, and no doubt you both will have questions from me at some point in the next week or so. So once again, thank you too, and thank you for everybody for joining us this evening, and I shall bid you all a very good night.